about you guys, but I love hanging out with my friends. Even if it's just one or two of us, I just think everything's a little more fun with a friend by your side. I think we can all agree that there are plenty of things in life, like going to the movies, showing up at a party, starting a new school, that just aren't as fun without a friend by your side. I think that's because friends have a way of making life feel a little more exciting.
Friends not only make life a little more fun and exciting, they can also make us feel braver. There are just certain things we are more likely to find the courage to do when we are doing them alongside other people. There is something about being with friends that gives us the confidence to do things we probably wouldn't do alone. Maybe it's getting the courage to talk to that special guy or girl after our friends dared us to do it 1,000 times. Or maybe it's deciding to try out for the school play because your friends are going to do it with you. Maybe it's even showing up here at church. You may not have done it without a friend by your side.
No matter what it is, I think the reality is this. Some of the best experiences in life happen because our friends give us the courage to do them. Think about it. What big, exciting, fun thing in your life has happened because you had a friend's encouragement? There's something about taking a big or scary step alongside someone else that makes it seem a lot less big and scary.
Now, some of you know this is true because you're living life alongside some really great friends. But for others of you, this may be harder to understand. Maybe making friends isn't as easy for you, and you're just not really sure how to even find one person to sit with at lunch, let alone make your life feel more exciting and fun every day. You know better than any of us that life can seem more difficult when you feel like you're doing it alone.
If that's you, then I'm so glad that you are here. Because I think no matter how many friends we have or don't have, we all know that some things are just harder to do by yourself. And believe it or not, I think following Jesus is one of those things. Think about it. Certain parts of our faith are really difficult to live out alone. Things like praying, choosing not to gossip about other people, loving people that everyone else ignores, making a decision to not follow the crowd. Those things are hard to do by yourself. They are the kind of things that make following Jesus feel lonely and difficult when it seems like you are the only one doing them.
You see, sometimes it takes courage to live out your faith. Sometimes it takes guts to follow Jesus. And when we're trying to do it all on our own, courage and guts can be a lot harder to find. In this series, we're learning a lot about the very first group of Christians by reading about them in the book of Acts. As we continue this week, we'll see how important sticking together was for their faith.
In the 4th chapter of Acts, we find two guys named John and Peter in a really interesting situation. John and Peter were some of the most important leaders in the early church, and they were followers of Jesus when he was alive on earth. So after Jesus died and rose again, Peter and John went around telling people about Jesus, and they experienced all sorts of incredible things because of their faith.
One time, they healed a man who couldn't walk. Pretty cool, right? They literally walked up to this guy who was paralyzed and told him, "Get up and walk." And then he did. Of course, people were pretty amazed that this guy who hadn't walked in years was suddenly running around the town.
But one specific group of people, the Sadducees, was a little frustrated. They couldn't explain what had happened to this guy who'd been healed, and it made them mad. The Sadducees had a lot of sway during their time. They were rich and powerful and had a lot of influence in Israel's politics and religion. And they were the people who had Jesus put on trial and killed. Now that Peter and John were going around town doing incredible things in Jesus' name, the Sadducees were not happy. Check out what happened. The priest and the captain of the temple guard and the Sadducees came up to Peter and John while they were speaking to the people. They were greatly disturbed because the apostles were teaching the people, proclaiming in Jesus the resurrection of the dead. They seized Peter and John, and because it was evening, they put them in jail until the next day. But many who heard the message believed, so the number of men who believed grew to about 5,000.
When the Sadducees got word that Peter and John were teaching people about Jesus, they decided to throw them in jail. But what I love about this story is that even when they locked Peter and John up in jail, the Bible tells us that people still started believing in Jesus because of them. It's pretty amazing if you ask me.
The morning after they were thrown in jail, the big shots in charge called Peter and John into the courtroom and asked them some questions. The religious leaders wanted to know exactly how Peter and John were able to do the things they were doing. In a moment of incredible courage, Peter, with John by his side, answered them, Peter stood in front of the most important people in Israel and told them it was because of Jesus, the guy these people literally had murdered, that they could do all the things that they were doing. And Peter didn't stop there. He went on to say that the only way anyone, including these guys, could be saved from death, forgiven of sin, and connected to God is to believe in Jesus.
Mic drop moment. And of course, the religious leaders didn't know what to say. When they saw the courage of Peter and John, and they realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. Peter and John, just two ordinary guys, showed incredible courage in front of an intimidating group of people. The Sadducees probably expected Peter and John to back down, but instead, they stood together. And that took the kind of bravery and courage that only comes easily when standing by a friend.
And as we read on, we see that the religious leaders ordered Peter and John to stop talking about Jesus before they released them from jail. And when they got out, they went back to their friends at home to tell them all about it. On their release, Peter and John went back to their own people and reported all that the chief priests and the elders had said to them. When they heard this, they raised their voices together in prayer to God.
How cool is that? Peter and John didn't just have the support of each other, they had the support of their friends too. When their friends heard all that had happened to them, they could have been afraid and distanced themselves to try to stay safe from the Sadducees. But they didn't. Instead, they decided to pray, not alone, but together. And here's what they prayed. Now, Lord, consider their threats and enable your servants to speak your word with great boldness.
After everything Peter and John went through together, after all the bravery that they showed, after all their friends prayed for them, what did they do? They stuck together and prayed that they have the courage to keep living out their faith. Why? Because they believe this truth. Together, we are braver.
I think this is the way that faith is supposed to be. We were never intended to live out our faith by ourselves. What Peter and John's stories show us is that we're meant to walk through it together. Together, we are braver. What do you think would happen if you began to see this church as a place where you could live out your faith together with other people? What would you have the courage to do if you knew that you weren't alone?
Maybe you'd be able to love people who were hard to love because you had a friend encouraging you. Maybe you'd be able to avoid getting caught up in the drama of middle school because you and your friends decided together you weren't going to give in to things like gossip and bad behavior. Maybe you'd even be able to invite someone to church because you knew you had a friend doing the same thing.
Who knows what might happen if we all agreed to stand together and live out what we believe with courage? Imagine if we as a group decided that together we were going to live the way Jesus taught us to live. Imagine how much more courage we might have knowing that we are all in this together. Because together we are braver. And as you leave today, I want you to think about this question. What's one way living how God intends us to live is easier with a friend?